Hello friends, welcome to my channel SushantChessWise. Today we are at the next topic and we are going to discuss how one should go about planning in the game of chess. So this is the example in front of you. Let's straight away go into the position to try to figure out first who is better, and then we'll try to make plan for black because it is black to play. See, every position has some very important key factors which will help us understand whether the position is better and to what extent it is better. Here we see several pluses for black. First, see the white pawns on d3 and e4. See, they are making this bishop on g2 somewhat bad. Secondly, the pawns are blocked by, see, this rook and the knight. They have been blocked nicely. Especially the d pawn has been blocked, which is a passed pawn, also a backward pawn weakness here. And you see black has two pawns against one on the queen side, which can give him a very good chance of creating a passer on the queen side when white's own passer is blocked. You can check out my lesson on pawn weaknesses which I made recently. So there you will find what is backward pawn, doubled pawn and how to exploit them. There is a lesson on that. I'll give the link in the description below. Another very important factor is the rook on f7, which is aligned very well with this king on the f1 square. So white king is also not somewhat safe. So these are the factors which black took into account, and he had a choice of two plans. Either go with b5, play right now the move b5, then a5, then b4, and then do something on the king side, or immediately go with the move f5 and try to exploit this king position, trade a few pieces, and then play on the queen side. Okay, in the game, black chose the move f5. In either case, you are correct, even if you are choosing the plan on the queen side. But here, black's plan was more direct and which gave him very easy, which we can say gave him a simplistic play. Okay, see, e takes f5, almost forced, bishop f5. Now see, there is a lot of pressure on d3. So white had to play ke2, almost forced. See, if rook d2, then there is the strong move knight g4. See, multiple threats at once. The knight attacks knight attacks h2, and knight e3 is forked. And the knight takes knight, loses on the spot to bishop g4. The rook on d1 is lost, it's a losing position. Now let us go to the game with ke2. After ke2, here too black has two purposes. One, pressurize d3 somewhat more, or go for trades and do something on the queen side. Okay, so he went with the move knight g4, very obvious one. It's a tactical move actually. Point we know already, knight g4 is blunder, because if knight takes knight, then again same story, bishop takes the knight, and then next move bishop takes on d1, so it's winning. So rook goes away. The reason for rook going away is a bit subtle. See, the point is, if knight f2 now, then king f2 and bg4 check, which seems to win the rook at first, allows ke3, bd1. See, the rook is not there on c2. So he moved that rook away, and after kd4, it is in fact, we can say white is somewhat better. White king is improved here, and then white can look to play kc4 and d4, d5. Maybe white is somewhat better here. In the game, black just took nh2, then king e3, and now see, rook goes away to a4. Black has won the pawn. Soon he starts trading the pieces, which we already know. So be4 takes. If pawn takes, then rook check, and here rook d3 loses on the spot. There is a small tactic here. See, the king and the knight are overloaded. So there comes, see, rook takes knight. Knight was the defender of the rook. So, and after rook takes, knight check, and see, takes, and the rook is lost, winning for black. Knight g4 check, good move, kd2, and what would you do as black here? Black plays as simply as possible. He trades the pieces. Knight f2, good move, very simple plan. Knight takes, rook takes, kc3, and he even wins one more pawn here. He could play here direct rook takes a2 as well, but that will allow the d pawn to advance. So instant rook a2 is not that great. So take, I can push the d pawn maybe. Okay, but still I would say this is also good for black. The king will soon come and settle in front of the pawn, d6 or d7. So rook a3 check first, rb3 and rook a2. Even the move rook f a2 is also good. As I showed you the previous line, here takes k c4, and then see king f6, d4, k e7, d5, and the king settles in front of the pawn and black should win. So rook a2, rook b5, k g6, rook d5. Now black goes for another trade. Rook f5, rook d6. White avoids the trade. Rook d6, rook d7, and now rook g2. The g pawn will also be lost. The trade of a pawn for g pawn is a great exchange. Black will just promote this pawn. So d4, rook g3 check, and here white chose to resign. Many will say white should have played a bit more because he has the d passer. I will show you one very simple technique here. Suppose you have two pawns here versus this one. Let's forget these two pawns for the time being. Then all we have to do is keep in mind that the pawn has to be advanced and we should be ready to give up this rook for this pawn. And then opponent cannot give his rook for our two pawns. That is the basic, very simple way to convert these positions. So see, after k c4, h5, d5, h4, d6, let's get the rook behind the passer. So first check, king b5, rook f3, rook d8, rook d3. Well, we may say now the black pawns are still behind and the rook has to be given up, right? See d7, but see h3, rook g8, king f5, d8, rook d8, and see the black pawns are very quick. g4, rook h8, kf4, king c4, and here the best technique is the move g3, rook h3, and g2. There is a method called moving downstairs that we can use to rook check. We should, if there are no pawns over here, then we should never go g5 at this point. We should just take the king down to f5. Again rook check, only way to try to harass the king. Again rook check, again king here, and now go g7. Now see, this rook cannot manage to come behind the passer and give checks. The point was that had we gone kg4 here, then white has the move rook h8 and the rook can be given up for the pawn. That is the only difference. Here anyway black would win in that case also because of the other pawns on the queen side. So we saw how black chose the plan. He first went on the king side and then used his queen side majority intact. I hope you will like this lesson. Definitely let me know in the comments below. Thanks for your time.